Around the 6th century AD, wealthy individuals who owned horses began to consider using them not only for transportation, but also in combat. They quickly realized the importance of horseback riding, which allowed strikes with spears and swords to be delivered with much greater force and mobility. This marked a turning point in the art of war, coinciding with the era of Charlemagne, ruler of the Franks, who had a tremendous impact on the shaping of medieval Europe. Amid constant wars and territorial disputes, the mobility and power of cavalry became the most important factors determining the outcome of battles and the fate of emerging states. At first, Frankish warriors used horses primarily to quickly reach the battlefield. However, over time, warriors began to understand that a horse was not merely a means of transport, but a true weapon that could be used in offensive operations. Soon, a new realization emerged. A mounted warrior surpassed a foot soldier, not only in speed, but also in striking power, height, and maneuverability. It was during this period that the transformation of mounted infantry into true heavy cavalry began, laying the foundation for a new class of warriors: knights. Knights became the symbol of the Middle Ages, an elite force equipped not only with powerful swords and lances, but also possessing high social status, which added prestige and influence. The development of cavalry was inextricably linked to the improvement of equipment and riding techniques. One of the most important inventions of this time was the stirrup. Before its introduction, riders suffered from instability. Any sudden movement or a forceful spear thrust could easily unseat a horseman. The arrival of the stirrup allowed the rider to firmly secure their feet, dramatically increasing balance and control in combat. Combined with heavy armor that covered the body and provided protection from blows, the knight became a living battering ram, capable of literally smashing through infantry formations with a single powerful strike. It was precisely the stirrups and heavy armor that made effective shock attacks possible, an iconic tactic of heavy cavalry. Charlemagne, fully aware of the importance and potential of cavalry, actively developed and strengthened mounted forces. His army was increasingly equipped with long spears and swords, making knights a formidable power capable of not only delivering devastating blows to infantry, but also holding critical strategic positions on the battlefield. This was the age of the first true knights, elite warriors who embodied the military might of medieval Europe. After Charlemagne, his successor Charles the Bald issued a decree in the 9th century, requiring all men who could afford to maintain a horse to participate in military campaigns with their own weapon and steed. This decision was driven by the constant threat posed by the Vikings, whose swift and audacious raids were becoming more frequent and destructive. In response to these challenges, fast and agile cavalry proved to be one of the most effective forms of defense. These new mounted warriors bore a strong resemblance to the heavily armed cataphracts of the late Roman Empire or the Eastern Clibanarii, fighters capable of operating in tight formations and literally pressing the enemy into the ground. The effectiveness of cavalry significantly increased with the introduction of a new type of saddle featuring a high cantle, which provided better support for the rider during a lance charge. This invention made it possible to deliver powerful shock blows without the rider being thrown from the saddle, allowing him to maintain control over the horse. As a result, the knight could unleash the full force of his strike and remain in the fight, greatly improving both the chances of victory and survival. Alongside lances, swords became widely used. These gradually grew longer and heavier. During this time, swords such as the falchion and the claymore came into use. They combined cutting and thrusting capabilities, allowing mounted warriors to fight effectively in close combat. Many people ask, how effective was heavy cavalry against dense infantry formations? Why didn't infantry simply try to cut the horse's legs to deprive knights of their greatest advantage? At first glance, the answer seems simple. Infantry did in fact attempt this, but in the chaos of actual battle, the situation was far more complex and dangerous than it might appear. In the midst of battle, cutting a horse's legs was much harder than it seemed. Medieval infantry fought in tight formations, and stepping out of formation to attack a horse's legs could be disastrous. An individual infantryman who tried to get close to a horse's legs became an easy target for the rider. To preserve their formation, soldiers would extend long spears forward, creating a kind of protective barrier. Given the speed and force of a cavalry charge, attempting to approach a horse's legs could be fatal. Even if one soldier dared to make such an attack, The others risked losing the integrity of the battle line, which would almost certainly lead to defeat. Moreover, infantry often lacked sufficiently long weapons to safely reach a horse's legs without leaving formation. The average infantry spear measured around 2 to 3 meters in length, while a knight's lance could reach 4 to 5 meters. This meant that before an infantryman could get close enough to strike a horse's legs, he might already be fatally impaled in the chest or head. Even if he got close, the horse could kick or trample him with its massive body. The knight's long lances created an almost impenetrable barrier, one that was extremely difficult to break through without sustaining serious injuries. In close combat, infantry often suffered heavy losses before even making contact with cavalry. Horses functioned not only as transport, but as weapons in their own right, knocking down soldiers, trampling them under hoof, and creating chaos and panic among enemy ranks. A single fallen horse could take several men out of the fight and collapse the infantry's formation. This is why experienced soldiers preferred not to try to kill horses outright, but rather to force them to change direction or retreat. As infantry tactics developed, especially with the introduction of halberds and long spears, the situation on the battlefield began to shift. The halberd was a combination of a spear and an axe, capable of both thrusting and slashing. These weapons allowed infantry to strike both the rider and the horse from a safer distance while maintaining their formation. In the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance, dense ranks of pikemen and spearmen significantly reduced the effectiveness of direct frontal cavalry charges, forcing knights to seek other tactical options. Even at this stage, the horse remained a very cautious animal with a strong survival instinct. It would not willingly hurl itself into an obstacle such as a solid wall of soldiers bristling with spears and shields. Even at full gallop, a horse would try to swerve or slow down if faced with an impenetrable barrier. A frontal cavalry charge against a solid formation was more of an exception than the rule. In most cases, cavalry attempted to outflank the formation, find weak spots, or strike from the sides. The psychological impact was no less important than the physical blow. The massive avalanche of glinting armor, the thunder of hooves and clashing blades would strike fear and confusion into the hearts of infantrymen. If even one soldier began to retreat, panic could quickly spread throughout the ranks, drastically reducing the army's combat effectiveness. It was precisely due to this fear and psychological pressure that knights were sometimes able to break into loosened formations and deliver a decisive strike. Although successful attempts to injure or kill horses did occur, they were rare. Weapons like halberds and long spears were more often used to maintain distance and defend against charges than to cut down horses' legs. If knights did manage to break into an infantry formation, a brutal and chaotic melee would ensue. Lances would snap, swords would clash, and each man fought for survival. In such close quarters, the horse could become both a weapon, knocking over enemies, and a liability if it fell and trapped its rider. A fallen horse created a blockage that was hard to escape, often resulting in the death of the knight. Thus, there was no universal method for countering cavalry. Battle tactics depended on many factors: the density and discipline of the formation, the morale of the troops, terrain, and weather conditions. Most importantly, both humans and horses were trying to survive in battle. They acted instinctively, not just according to rehearsed strategies. The history of medieval warfare is not only a collection of legends about invincible knights and cavalry breakthroughs. It is a complex, interconnected process of military evolution, where tactics, technology, and psychology all played vital roles. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this incredible story and want to learn more fascinating facts, subscribe to the channel.